Shalom, and welcome back to Bnei Noach Academy, Thoughts on the Torah. Please remember to hit the like button, to subscribe, most importantly, to share this insight and inspiration with friends and family. So you look in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 1, verse 23. Moshe, that is Moses, is reminding the people about the grave sin that they committed in demanding that they send the spies, and ultimately what the spies did to them, or what they really did to themselves as a result of this mission of the spies, that they doubted God, and because of that, it was decreed upon them to stay in the desert for 40 years. But if you look at this verse, the Hebrew words are Vayitav be'inai hadavar. Literally translated, the matter was good in my eyes. That means it pleased me. The idea pleased me. And then he says, therefore, I took from amongst you, I chose the best, 12 of the best and most noteworthy men, one for each tribe, and then I sent them off on this mission. Now, let's contrast this, let's compare this back to the book of Numbers, chapter 13, verse 2. Verse 1 says, and God spoke to Moses, saying, verse 2, Shlach lecha anashim, send agents for you, meaning God is telling him to send it. Here, however, in the book of Deuteronomy, Moses seems to be making the point, the case he's making is that he is the one who decided it. But over there, it's God who tells him to do it, or so it seems. Well, if you recall, when we studied that, we did point out that God didn't tell him directly to send the people, but rather he gave Moses the green light, saying, if you want, you can make the decision, you can make the choice to send them. However, if you choose not to, then they shouldn't be sent. And that's what Moses is actually emphasizing here. It's I who made this decision. God didn't tell me to send them. And you understand, if God would have directly told him to send them, then it would be unfair to punish the people. Because then it would have been, so to speak, a decree from God and almost like a setup from God. But in this case, Moses says, it's I, meaning a human being like you, who made this decision, who made this choice. Now, let's understand, why did he make this choice? If now we find out, Moses sheds light that this was entirely his doing, in the sense that he was the one who could have made a decision to or not to send the spies, and yet he made a decision to send them, yet he's not culpable for what happened. What exactly is it? How could we explain it? How do we understand it? Well, the famous and most important, most authoritative commentary on the Torah is Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. Rashi explains that what Moses did was actually trying to employ basic human psychology. And he gives a parable, he gives a metaphor, where he says, if somebody's selling in the olden days, a donkey, today you can say a used car. And the potential buyer says, listen, is this donkey strong enough? Could it traverse mountains? And the guy says, sure, it can go up hills, no problem. Is it do well going downhill? Yes. Is it good with carrying loads? Absolutely, nothing to worry about. In other words, the person seems so forthcoming and very confident, not hiding anything, not trying to pull one on you. What happens? The buyer becomes so convinced that even if they had any doubt, those doubts become erased. And the person goes ahead and makes the purchase. And that's what Moses was thinking. He was thinking in basic human psychology. If I tell them, no, you shouldn't send spies, let me convince you, let me explain to you, let me remind you why we shouldn't, because we believe in God and so on and so forth. Who knows, maybe that would have still left some doubt in their minds. And even if they would have went along with it, and they would have followed him into Israel, but perhaps it wouldn't have been with their whole heart. And what God wanted is that the people embrace this entry to the Holy Land, that they actually want it, that they actually desire it. In order to desire something, you have to really want it. If you don't want it, then you do it anyway. That's doing it reluctantly. And Moses was so convinced that when he tells the people, sure, you want to send spies? Go ahead, no problem. There's nothing to worry about. I am so sure, I'm so convinced that everything's fine, everything's fantastic, that I have no problem with you sending spies. He was certain that the people will say, oh, wow, you know what? Maybe we don't have to do this. But he says, yet you went ahead and you did it anyway. This tells us, I think it highlights the vulnerability of the human being. At the end of the day, we're a lot better off when we rely on God. True, God wants us to make decisions. He wants us to, even to some degree, to worry a little about things, not to just sit back and not do anything and not have any concern. We need to live in the reality that's in this world. But at the same time, we have to try as much as possible to find those ways to rely on God. The moment you start to rely on the human intellect, on the human emotions, on the human decisions, unfortunately, we become very, very vulnerable. Here we see an example. What greater human to ever walk this earth than Moses? In fact, this is a human being that didn't just walk this earth. Well, we know that he spent time in heaven while he was still alive, body and soul. And yet, his decision was also vulnerable, because look what happened, even though he had every good intent. So it tells us how careful we have to be, but at the same time, not to throw away responsibility, not to throw it off our backs and say, okay, let God decide. That doesn't work either. That's not what God desires from us. But still, while we're making our decisions and everything, and so on and so forth, to always, as much as possible, maintain that connection to God's will and let God, so to speak, make the decision.